I welcome you back to my channel. I'm Samson Alibra Sunday. Today I'm going to take you on how to fix a suit sleeve. In my previous class, we were taught on how to make or construct a suit sleeve, how to cut and construct a suit sleeve. Now, when fixing a sleeve, you need your sleeve, your shoulder pad, and your sleeve body. This is the sleeve body we are going to use on the shoulder point. Now, these are the things we need. Now we have coupled our body, we've joined the front and the back, we have fixed the collar. Now we are going for the sleeve. This is the arm eye. This is the arm eye. So first thing first, you take your sleeve. Due to the pattern I'm using, there is a notch here in which it's been there since from drafting. We demarcate a notch that will enable us get the right settings. So we are going to run a stitch, a loose stitch, without reinforcement. So now you're losing your stitch length, you're losing it a bit. So now this notch that is here, you can see the notch here, your sewing should start below your notch. So, and it should be a loose stitch without reinforcement. You don't need to reinforce. Once you start, you move. You don't need to reinforce. So now you take a loose stitch down like this. Down to the smaller part of the hand. Then you stop. I told you earlier, you don't need to reinforce. Reinforcement means making the edge of the stitch tight, so you don't need to go backward and come forward. This is a loose stitch. So after then, there is something they call rem, or some people call it coning, in which you drag your sleeve to give it a curve that looks something like this. So now that is what we are going to do, so to fit in the sleeve on the body. Now we ran the loose stitch from the inner part. So now when trying to make your cone, you use your lower thread, not the upper thread. So you use your lower thread, and we start your coning from the back. Where this notch is the front part of the sleeve. So now we try to pull it from the back. So this is how it's been done. Now the benefit of we trying to cone this tip is to give the sleeve a nice fitting on the body. There are principles governing the pattern, which we have explained in the previous videos, because every video has its own, every part has its own video that is being done. So after you cone, trying to cone, and you make sure your cone should not get to the front part, and it must not get to this notch. So the highest your cone should start from the back down to this middle part, then you can blend it to the front. Something like this must not be found on the notch area. So you try to cone, you pull it, then you blend it a little, just to create a small puff or a small curve at the tip of the sleeve. So once you're able to achieve that, then you can now size it to the body. Now for we to size it to the body, you take your main body. On the main body too, there is a notch there which is explained on the drafting. So you do well and watch the other videos so you can get a clearer picture of what I'm trying to say. So we set it based on the notch we have. You set it from notch, this is the notch and this is the notch. So you place it at the same notch point. So you can use your office pin to pin it. So once you pin it, then you can now size your sleeve to the body. Once you size it round, and see if it will suit the body or not. So once you've done that, so now you can see there's a small allowance here. So once you can feel some allowance, if the sleeve is bigger than the body, then you try to tighten up your coning, and once the sleeve is smaller, then you loosen your coning so it will fit perfectly. So now I've loosened mine a little. So once you've done that, so you try to stitch, and on this point you are supposed to sew right beside your loose stitch, and you don't need to reinforce. As I said earlier, you don't need to reinforce. So this is my thread. I can now remove my pins. Then this is where I'm going to sew, right beside my loose stitch. So once you sew right beside your loose stitch, so now this is how we're going to sew it round the sleeve. You sew it complete. So this is it. You don't need to reinforce. Then you cut off your thread. Now you can, this is how it is. From the back, this is how it is. Now after you've done this, then you take your sleeve body, you will now cut your sleeve body 3.2 inch straight up. So now once you get your 3.2, this 16 can still serve. You can cut yours by 17, 3.2 by 17. So this is 2 parts. I will now split it into 2. Then I'm using 1 part for the sleeve. Now how do we bend it? You bend it into 3 layers like this. This 1, 2 and 3. So now two parts will be on one place like this. So now we have 1, 2, then the other one is down. So this is how it will be like. You ensure you fold it this way. So once you fold it, you try to pull it so it will create a curve. It will create a curve there. So this is how it will now be like. So this is it. Now this is my shoulder point or my armhole joint. Now I have on this middle part where your front and back is being joined, you search for it. This is the middle point. You can indicate your middle point with either your pen or your chalk. So having this, you pick your curved sleeve wadding, then you place it right where the center is, then you size it. Now there is this joining at the side where you join the front and the back together. So now your seaming should start 1 inch below the joining. So this is how it is. And when sewing, this is our thread. We sew right beside it, not outside but inside. We sew right beside it till we get to the front part. So this is how it is. Now we can reinforce. So you continue your sewing. You sew beside your seam. Now on this part, this is where my notch is, the notch in which we use as settings. Now your sewing is supposed to stop on your notch area like this. So once you get to your notch, you can cut off the remaining sleeve wadding out, then you cut the remaining one from the back. So this is how it is on the inner part. After now we get our shoulder pad. This is our shoulder pad. It's already bigger than this. I had to trim the thing out to be of this size. So now this seems to be straight. We are going to shaping the shoulder pad a little with 0.2. We take 0.2 from it like this. Then you can take the middle part of the shoulder pad. You give it a notch. Take the middle part. Give it a notch. So now this notch now represents the center point. Now when fixing shoulder pad, this notch and this your point, this your marked point. This marked point represents the center point where your shoulder joining is. So your notch will fall directly to your marked area, and you don't just place it right the way it is. The shoulder pad is coming out with 0.2 away from the tip of the shoulder joining. So it will be 0.2 away like this. So the same thing too. This is our sewing. Our seaming is coming from this direction, right beside our seaming. So you place it this way and you seam from the inside. So once you seam from the inside, right beside your last stitch, So you sew it complete till the end of, from one edge of the shoulder pad till the other edge. So now this is how it is. You can see the shoulder pad is out with a little inch away from the main tip of the shoulder. So now you try to balance it up. Once you balance it up, you can now hold your shoulder pad to your canvas and stitch them together. So this is how it is. So you stitch them together, just a little reinforcement, it's okay to hold them together. So now we have fixed the fabric, we have fixed the shoulder, the sleeve wording, and we have fixed the shoulder pad. The next thing we are supposed to do is you balance up your lining. You ensure the lining is balanced. Then this is our shoulder point here. You take your scissors and you notch that area on the lining part. So now this is it. This is our notch on the lining. This is our center. Now we just want to ensure we have a good setting, both the fabric and the lining. Now if we are to place it like this, that means automatically you can see it's not folding from this point. But if you have to balance it, then it will give you a new setting. So now we use this setting as a guide. Now there is also a notch here on the lining part. From the previous videos, we learned how we came about this notch. So you do well and watch the other videos so you get a clearer picture of what we are saying. Now what is left for us to do now is for we to seal up the lining part. Now this is the lining part. We are done with the fabric, the sleeve body, and the shoulder pad. Now we are trying to seal up the lining part. Now what you did on the fabric, you run a loose stitch. You run a loose stitch as well. Just the way you did on the fabric part. You run a loose stitch without any reinforcement. Then you try to pull the lower thread just the way you did on the fabric part. So here it is. Try to cone it as well so it will have the same shape as the fabric. So now after you've done your coning, there is this settings here that we have. We are having a distance of ½ inch from this line to this line. This line represents the joining of the main front to the side of the front, and this other line represents the joining of the bigger and smaller sleeve. Now the difference of these points now is ½ inch. So now this point, this joining of the front and the side, is where we arrive on this notch on the lining part. So now since the distance of these two lines is ½ inch, so be the lining point. Now this point represents the joining of the front, the bigger and the smaller parts of the sleeve. Now since we have a difference of ½ inch, now this notch represents the joining of the front, and this line represents the bigger and smaller joining. Now you get to measure your ½ inch from here. you get your half inch from this point. So now this is it. This is our half inch from here. Now this line will fall from our half inch. So this is the settings. It falls from this point. Then so now this is our half inch and this is our joining. You set it together, you ensure you set it, then you can now stitch them together. So you stitch them together. And mind you, your sewing, all your seamings must not get to half inch. The max sewing with this pattern is 0.4. Now this is our notch of the middle joining of front and the back. This is it. So you take a smaller pieces of lining, just like this. You place it right on the notch while you step together of the joining. So you sew. So when sewing, you get to a point in which you can sew no more, which is on this point. Once you get to a level in which you cannot sew anymore, just reinforce and you stop. So once you stop, you can now pull it from the inside. Now pull it from the inside. Now this is how it is. Try to balance it up. Then after you are done with this level, then this remaining part that is here that we are supposed to seal, we use an opening to finish it up.
You turn up.
So you can now complete your sewing from this direction. That's possible. So now, after you're done joining or sealing the lining, that small pieces you place on this point. This small lining you place on this point will be joined to that notch on your shoulder pad. On this notch, you place them together. Now this lining now symbolizes the center point of the shoulder joining, so you can now stitch them together. So after you stitch these two places together, this should be your last stitch of the sleeve. So after you've joined or you've sealed this piece together, you can now pull out your sleeve to this point. Now this is how it is. So you can see it now. This is how it is on the body part. So after you're done fixing, you can now try to size it on your body and see how fit the thing is. Thank you very much. I remain Samson Sunday Alibra, the host of Suit Cruise.